Good day, everyone. My name is John Michael Joshua V. Balingao, and I will be the one to present the Chapter 1 of our thesis entitled with COVID-19 and its impact on education, social life, and mental health of students. We all have been affected by the current COVID-19 pandemic. However, the impact of the pandemic and its consequences are felt differently depending on our status as individuals and members of society. While some try to adapt to working online, homeschooling, and their children ordering food via Instacart, others have no choice but to expose to the virus while keeping society functioning. Our different social identities and the social groups we belong to determine our inclusion within society, by extension our vulnerability to epidemics. The outbreak of COVID-19 affected the lives of all sections of society as people were asked to self-quarantine in their homes to prevent the spread of the virus. The lockdown had serious implications on mental health, resulting in psychological problems including frustration, stress, and depression. The article identified the following as the impact of COVID-19 on the students of different age groups. Time is spent on online classes and self-study, medium used for learning, sleeping habits, daily fitness routine, and the subsequent effects on weight, social life, and mental health. Moreover, a research found that in order to deal with stress and anxiety, participants adopted different coping mechanisms and also sought help from their near ones. The e-learning experience, the education institutions are required to comply with the guidelines and recommendations by the government agencies, while keeping students encouraged to continue learning remotely in this tough environment. The statement of the problem. This study aimed to look for the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on education, social life, mental health of every student from different age groups. Specifically, it sought to answer the following questions. First, what is the influence do COVID-19 pandemic have on the student in terms of education, social life, and mental health? 2. Determine the possible effects and arguments on why students struggling on these three categories, the education, social life, and mental health, while facing the COVID-19 pandemic. 3. Is there a significant difference on how students approach education, on social life, on face-to-face, and the online learning we are experiencing today? And the last one is, what are the things that every student must do in order to cope up with the pandemic we are facing? Next is the significance of the study. The study aimed to look for the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the education, social life, and mental health of every student from different age groups. At the same time, the researchers aimed to determine the possible effects on their education, social life, and mental, and how they cope up with the pandemic. The scope and the limitation. A set of questionnaire was developed, which included a variety of multiple choice questions, Likert scale, and for a few questions. The respondents were allowed to enter free text. The survey was administered using the Google Form platforms, which requires subject to be logged into an email account to participate in the survey. It restricted multiple entries from an individual account. The distribution of the questionnaire were conducted through the outreach of social media platforms, emails, and standard messaging services. Clear instructions with the Google form were provided to ensure the respondents must be a student.
Hello guys, this is a 5 RRL or review of related literature that supports our research. First, this is foreign studies titled Lockdown for COVID-19 and its impact on community mobility in India. An analysis of the COVID-19 community mobility reports on 2020. Coronavirus disease COVID-19 is a novel public health problem threatening the whole world. As an upshot, countrywide lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic has been supportive of changing community mobility trends of various categories including retail and recreation, groceries and pharmacies, parks, transit stations, workplace, and residential in India. Globally, coronavirus disease or COVID-19 is a novel public health problem threatening the whole world, and amid sudden appearance and spread of novel coronavirus or the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or the SARS-CoV-2. On March 11, 2020, World Health Organization has declared the novel COVID-19 outbreak as a global pandemic. COVID-19 is a vastly contagious disease rapidly spreading from its origin in Wuhan City, Hubei province of China, to the rest of the world. And second, that support our study is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on education. International evidence from the responses to educational disruption survey. Across the world, the coronavirus pandemic or COVID-19 shut down schools and forced parents to take charge of their children's schooling. Parents differ in their resources and ability to provide effective homeschooling, which means that COVID-19 could enhance existing inequalities in children's learning opportunities. And survey data on homeschooling activities collected during the first phases of COVID-19 show that parents of high socioeconomic status. And third, titled Impact of COVID-19 and Lockdown on Mental Health of Children and Adolescents. This is a narrative review with recommendations. Restrictions on movements, school closures, and staying home during the COVID-19 pandemic may lead to increased rates of domestic violence, loneliness, depression, anxiety, panic, and fear, and drug use among high school students. In this regard, some techniques should be considered to help students minimize mental health consequences, such as develop ways of interacting with students to overcome loneliness and bridge social distancing. Also, interview in cases of violence involving children or their families, as this part of the community may not have the capacity to report and order emergency assistance. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought the mental health of a variety of affected populations into focus. It is known that the prevalence of epidemics accentuates or creates new stressors including fear and worry for oneself or loved ones, constraints on physical movement and social activities due to quarantine and sudden and radical lifestyle changes. A recent review of virus outbreaks and pandemics document stressors such as infections, fears, frustration, boredom, inadequate supplies, inadequate information, and financial loss and stigma. Much of the current literature on psychological impacts of COVID-19 has emerged from the earliest hotspot in China. Although several studies have assessed mental health issues during epidemics, most have focused on health workers, patients, children, and general population. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought into focus the mental health of various affected populations. It is known that the prevalence of epidemics accent- accentuates or creates new stressor including fear and worry for one or loved ones, constraints the physical movement and social activities due to quarantine and radical lifestyle changes. The findings of our study highlights the urgent need to develop interventions and preventing strategies to address the mental health of college students. And COVID-19 and its impact of education, social life, and the mental health of students. This is a survey. The outbreak of COVID-19 affected the lives of all sections of society as people were asked to self-quarantine in their homes to prevent the spread of the virus. The lockdown had serious implications on mental health, resulting in psychological problems including frustrations, stress, and depression. In order to explore the impacts of this pandemic on the lives of students, they conducted a survey of a total of 1,183 individuals of different age groups from various educational institutes in Delhi National Capital Region or the NCR of India. The article identified the following as the impact of COVID-19 on the students of different age or groups: time spent on online classes and self-study, medium used for learning, sleep habits, daily fitness routine, and the subsequent effects on weight, social life, and mental health. Moreover, our research found that in order to deal with stress and anxiety, participants adopted different coping mechanisms and also sought help from their near ones. Further, the research examined the students' engagement on social media platforms among different age categories. This suggests that public authorities should take all the necessary measures to enhance the learning experience by mitigating the negative impact caused due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Youth is foster care often experience more difficult in school compared to their non-foster care peers. Difficulties exist across domain of academic functioning, including both performance, for example, is the low grades, and behavioral health, an example if this is high externalizing concerns in school. And this is our local studies and titled Amidst COVID-19 Pandemic, the self-efficacy and academic motivation of the college student from the private higher education institutions in the Philippines. Now, we are all staying at home due to the lockdown policy imposed by the government. However, learning should not stop. Different countries around the world have responded differently to continue the educational process during the pandemic, introducing distance learning. These are online learning platforms such as Google, TV shows, guides, resources, video lectures, and online channels. As school reopen for the next school year, it is important to plan how school will fulfill its mission of providing a quality education for every student. As school is a public place, crowds are inevitable and children are at risk. So policies on tuition fees need to be strengthened and creating opportunities for online learning platforms. The Department of Education emphasized that it would not necessarily mean that teachers and learners will go to school and learn inside the classroom and devise various modalities to ensure the online learning a choice all among all others online platform and blended learning such as but not limited to Google Classroom, Messenger, Zoom, Edmodo, Facebook, and YouTube. In addition, both will adopt numerous learning delivery options such as but not limited to face-to-face, blended learnings, distance learnings, and homeschooling and other modes of delivery. This is a CHED sample. However, the implementation would pose such problems on students who have limited internet access, no gadgets, and the poor. According to the report of Akamai on 2017, the Philippines has the lowest internet connectivity in Asia. Besides, such challenges would be equity gaps, student security and safety, quality of learning compromised, and poor assessment results. Changes on the grading system, assessment, and evaluation of students' performance will also be a challenge to every administrator. Teacher competencies in both pedagogy and technology should be reinforced. This transition to the new normal from the four corners of the classroom to the borders of virtual reality, every learning institutions needs to study how successful online learning is in providing quality education and outcomes-based education to students.
Research methodology. This chapter discusses the research methodology adhered by the researcher to systematically answer the specific problem posed for investigation. In addition, this chapter presents the research design, respondent of the study, research instrument, data gathering procedures, data analysis, and statistical treatment. Research design. This study utilized a cross-sectional, predictive, quantitative, non-experimental research design by Burke Johnson as it deals with quantifying and analyzing variables to get the result. This design involves the utilization analysis of numerical data using a statistical technique to conclude. Cross-sectional is when the data are collected in current time at the same time across all the respondents. On the other hand, the predictive, quantitative, non-experimental present a causal relationship among variables, categorizing the information which supports the research question without manipulating the independent variable. Respondent of the study and sampling method. This study involved a sample size of 100 tertiary students from Sabelle State University in Kawayan. The 100 respondents were considered to meet the requirement for multiple regression and are randomly selected. Research instrument. A set of questionnaires was developed which included a variety of multiple choice questions, like scale, and for a few questions, the respondents were allowed to enter free text. The survey was administered using the Google Forms platform, which requires subject to be logged into an email account to participate in the survey. It restricted multiple entries from an individual account. The distribution of the questionnaire was conducted through the outreach of social media platforms, email, and standard messaging services. Clear instructions with the Google form were provided to ensure the respondent must be a student. The study used a hedonic scale with the choices of 5 points. Data gathering procedures. A web-based survey was conducted to students through the medium of Google Online platforms. Upon the approval of the research instrument, the researcher will formally write a letter to the superintendent of the school, to the respective school heads of the school zone, namely school branches, for their consent to conduct the study and the request to get the email address of the respondent to facilitate the research instrument and the interviews via Google Form and Google Meet respectively. Due to current health crisis brought by COVID-19 pandemic, the researcher may not be allowed to go to these schools and would opt to send this formal letter by school's official email address. Once the request has been granted, the online survey questionnaire using Google Form will be administered to entire full-time and part faculty and administrator of the school. to validate the responses from their instrument. The researcher will also conduct a structured interview via Google Form with the selected respondents, including the student through a focus group discussion. Statistical treatment of data. Kruskal-Wallis test, a non-parametric test, was used to assess the significant difference in the time spent on the aforementioned activities among different age distributions. Fisher's exact test was performed to assess the difference between the respondents' health with the variables of interest.